One of the problems we run into is when we don't like the person, and so as a result of not liking the person, we're not willing to receive the truth. To me, that's a weakness more than it is a strength, and likely going to hold people back. So you learn far more by paying attention to what the person is saying than trying to attack the person.
Can you speak on how to develop critical thinking skills?
This is a great question. I'm just thinking deeply about things, coming back to a thought over and over again. We tend to use essentially lazy thinking, which serves a purpose, by the way. Daniel Kahneman would call it System 1 thinking in his book, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, I believe is the title of it. But we tend to use lazy thinking, which is energy efficient, to make decisions. And they're largely based on past experience of something working, correlation to other things, and an emotional feedback loop that kind of keeps us unaware of those decisions. Sometimes they can serve us, however, if you were conscious of them at one point and then integrated them as habit. Sometimes you'll make decisions that we could call our instinctual or subconscious that serve you, but very often we don't get out of childhood without lots of trauma related to this idea and how we look at the world. And so a lot of our decisions are unconscious and they're just not serving us. They're based on our stories about the world, our experiences, and assumptions we're making that we're not challenging, which leads to lazy thinking, generally leads to looking for information that supports our way of looking at the world, or we perceive information through our lens, and so we either mutate it or change it into a story that fits our worldview. Critical thinking or deep thinking is just the opposite. Fundamentally, it's working on removing yourself from the equation as much as you possibly can, so you become more the objective observer versus trying to have information fit into your worldview or into your story of self or other, meaning your identity. Critical thinking is allowing yourself the space to ask a lot of questions. Now, not just questions, but quality questions. The quality of our answers very much come from the quality of our questions. So taking the time to really ponder or think about something. And I've had certain questions that I have asked myself for 10 plus years, and layers keep getting pulled back the more I ask these questions. And so instead of looking for quick answers, look for, we could say, correct or higher truth answers that come in time. And a good way to kind of start on the big topics when you're trying to think critically about something, get to a point where you could fundamentally and effectively argue both sides to something. So the most contentious issues in our society, pick one, and then get comfortable being able to genuinely argue both sides of it and see it from both sides. More often than not, the truth is in the middle. And that isn't a very convenient place for humans to want to hang out. And so they usually take a very strong side, one side or the other. And the opportunity cost of that is they generally are missing the truth, and they're not on solid ground. And so taking the time to see both sides of an issue, seeing both sides to a decision, and then being able to effectively argue both sides. How would you know you're arguing effectively? Well, I will do this randomly, where in a social situation, I will argue the opposite side to a point that seems to be an important one to a peer group or a social group. And very often they don't realize I don't actually hold to that side of an argument because I'm effective at conveying that point. They go, wow, that's a really good way of seeing that. I never thought about it that way. When you start getting that kind of feedback, it lets you know you probably are doing a pretty good job of seeing both sides to something, but get comfortable arguing both sides to a point. Also, a great place to start, look at the fallacies of reasoning. Study the fallacies of reasoning. I think there's 8 of the main ones, and you'll start to see it in the way people show up in conversation and how they argue. A popular one in our society right now is ad hominem, where we attack the person, not the issue. This seems to slide. Social media to me reminds me more of high school than it does any intelligent discourse for the most part. But this seems to slide, and we're comfortable doing that in our society right now, where we will attack a person and try to attack the character of the person because we don't like what they're sharing. You learn far more by paying attention to what the person is saying than trying to attack the person. And when you do that, you can learn from anyone, and you can get comfortable hearing truth out of anybody's mouth, no matter who it is. One of the problems we run into is when we don't like the person, and so as a result of not liking the person, we're not willing to receive the truth. To me, that's a weakness more than it is a strength, and likely going to hold people back. So there's a handful of things that I would do to just practice deeper, more critical thinking, and then listen to and follow people with opposing views. I do this all the time. If you look at any of the people I follow, many of them have opposing views, and that's by design. I read plenty of books on topics and from people that I don't necessarily agree with, because I want to hear and understand lots of perspectives. I don't want to get siloed in my way of thinking, and I'm comfortable being challenged and challenging my assumptions about the world wherever I possibly can.
Hi, Sabastian here. Today's video was sponsored by our Patreon community. You can check out more content, behind the scenes stuff, exclusive content there, and join the community. I'll see you in there.